The Dice Tower, episode 581. It's getting dark in here.
The Dice Tower is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. This episode is sponsored by USAopoly. Share laughter and make memories. Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them.
In today's show, Mandy and I go a little bit dark, and we catch up on the mailbag a bit. I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandy Hutchinson.
And hello, dear Mandy. It's lovely to talk with you.
Hello.
I've been looking at your social media feed, and boy, oh boy, you have been plugging through gameplays lately.
Holy moly, I literally have stacks in my basement of the Essen games that I'm trying to go through. And it's funny because my game group, when they come over now, they're like, oh, no, let's make a pile of all the ones we played so we can see our progress.
Your progress.
Yes.
I like that. No, it's like making a checklist where you get a sense of accomplishment as you get to mark things off.
This is, yeah.
Now, I had to ship, in spite of my best efforts, I did end up having to ship an extra box of games back because I did not have enough room in my luggage. Well, I got my box, but Mandy, what had happened is I'd forgotten that to pad the box a little bit, I'd used my PJs. And so I got my box and I'm all excited. Oh, yay, my games are finally here. Yeah. And I cut it open and I open it up and boom, dirty laundry is the first thing I see because I completely forgotten that my laundry was used as
padding.
Bubble wrap for my games. But I will say that my PJs served as wonderful protection and that my games arrived from Germany in good condition. So that worked out well, I think.
That's so good. See, clothes can be useful other than just for wearing them.
Well, and I was ready to leave them behind, man, if I had to get those games home, but it worked out well.
I know.
And then, let's see, I get to see you in person in just a couple of weeks from when we're recording and really from when this airs because we will be at PAX Unplugged.
Yes.
In Pennsylvania, right?
In where? In
Pennsylvania?
Philadelphia?
Philadelphia?
Yeah, Philadelphia.
Okay. I knew it was a P place.
I'm pretty sure. Okay, Philadelphia. We're going to go with that and hope that's the right place.
And I know that you're going to be spending a lot of time at Restoration at Renegade's booth.
Yeah, so...
And I'm going to be spending a lot of time at Restoration's booth.
Yeah, so people are looking for us. We are still repping Dice Tower, I guess, to a certain degree, but I'll be there as a special guest of Renegade. So Mandy from the Dice Tower with Renegade. So if you're looking for me, you can pop by. And I think I'm mostly going to be teaching Spell Smashers and cool. Teach and Play. I think I'm doing Junk Orbit and so some of their new releases. So anybody wants to come by for a picture, for a chat, whatever you'd like. That's where I'll be. What about you? You'll be...
Oh, special guest, huh?
I know, fancy.
No, she. I am not a special guest at Restoration.
Like an old shoe at Restoration.
I am there, just me. And I honestly have no idea what I'm going to be doing there. I assume I will be talking about games and Restoration's Fireball Island. It's going to be the first official convention where Fireball Island is out. As a reminder, I work a little bit behind the scenes with Restoration Games, so
yes,
take that all with a grain of salt. But yeah, so I'll be at their booth, just helping them out wherever I can. I'm really excited. I've never been to PAX Unplugged. I'm hearing great things about it, so I'm really excited to see it for myself and to figure out what all the dealio is there. It sounds like it's pretty large compared to... especially for a convention that's only in its second year. So I'm excited to see what that's like.
I think you'll like it. Definitely different than some of the other ones. A lot of newer gamers. It's a bit more on the chill side. I'm curious to see how it's evolved for this year, but yeah, definitely something I think you'll enjoy.
And, since Tom and Eric are going to be there, I think we should rope them into doing some recording with us there. Don't you think?
I know. I'm really thinking maybe if we can cross our fingers, make this happen, some shelf staple, maybe one and done. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
I want to make them do a one and done. Yeah, good idea. I like how you think. And then in December, I'm not going to get to see you, but you're going to someplace warm and sunny, right?
Yes, this is going to be my last con for the year, well, until next year, but the retreat, Dice Tower Retreat. And I will be there on weekend number 2. So I think that's like the 14th, the weekend of 13th, 14th, 15th, something along those lines. And apparently that's the Canadian weekend. Apparently a lot of Canadians are going on the second weekend of the retreat. I believe
Did y'all just send a memo around, or what's the deal there?
It was a coincidence. We just knew. We felt each other that we were all going to go on the second.
You just had a herd like instinct. Somehow the Canadian hormones flew out and you're all like, okay, it was Florida.
That's where all the resources are. Did you catch that?
I got it, Mandy. Alrighty. Well, I hope you have a good time. I love smaller conventions and smaller game gatherings. I feel like they're more casual, more relaxed. You can get a lot of games played and just really get to know people. And so I think that sounds like a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. I'm really excited to see how it goes.
But we are not a podcast that just talks about gaming events that we are blessed and lucky enough to get to go to. We're a podcast that talks about games that we actually play. Mm-hmm. So we should talk about all these games that we've been playing.
All right, so let's talk about some games we played, and they have been aplenty for myself. However, I will keep it to a minimum. Okay, well, sort of. But anyway, so the first game that I'm going to talk about is Blackout Hong Kong. So this is designed by Alexander Pfister. The artist is Chris Quilliams, and the publisher is Eggertspiel. It plays 1 to 4 players, about 75 to 150 minutes, and the price for this, it was a bit odd to find, but prices, before I continue, prices were taken from Board Game Bliss Canadian website and Cool Stuff Inc. for the American pricing. So this on site is about $70 US. Now keep in mind, it's not, I think it's on pre-order in some places, might be difficult to get. The price may be slightly different. So in this game, it is literally Hong Kong has been struck by an unexpected blackout, hence the name Blackout Hong Kong. Okay, and basically the government's trying to get control, but you need to take matters into your own hands. That is literally what they say. So this game can be played in a campaign mode, which I did not play. We played as a single game. We just played several of them. So in Blackout Hong Kong, it plays over a number of rounds, basically until the draw deck runs out, at which point then that round is over and you got to play one more round. Each of the rounds is divided into 8 phases. So before we get into the phases, let me start off by saying the board spread out. It's this big black dark board, and you have a little rondel on the board that's imprinted, and you're going to roll some dice, and they're going to go on this rondel because these are going to be your resources. See, I said it with an S there, as Canadians sometimes say with that lazy Z.
You wild woman.
I know, so crazy. So the reason why I'm explaining it's important for later, and then on the map we have these cubes that will also be placed out at a later time, just to give you an idea. And then we've got on the side some cards, the cards I was telling you about that's running the round. They're set up to the side, and I believe there's 9 of these cards, and we'll explain a little bit about those later. So in the game, it runs through 8 phases. Everybody gets a player board, and on this board, it lists the 8 phases for you. You have a deck of cards. Everybody has the same type of cards, but you have your own kind of faction listed on them. And each of them you'll know have, some of them have little colored squares on them. Those will come into play later. Some of them give you additional currency abilities and that sort of thing. So the first thing you're going to do is roll the resources dice and plan your cards. So this is something that we all want to kind of do together. So you have the dice. I think it's a yellow, blue, and red. And you roll them, and they have different resources on them, like water, food, gasoline, things like that. You roll them, making sure none of them are the same, and then place those dice on that rondel. This is where you can develop resources. And everybody has cards which you're going to plan. So you have slots at the bottom of your board, and you're going to look through your hand and say, what do I want? Do I want to get resources? If there's no die on that resource spot, you're not going to generate resources. So you want to pick one where there is already a die. So if there's a die on food and it's red, you want to look for a color card that has red on it in order to generate resources. So these cards you can put into your slots 1, 2, or 3 card, each in the separate slots, or you can just choose one. You don't have to place all 3. When everyone's ready, flip them over, and then you resolve them. So this could be as simple as getting resources. It might be abilities like getting you money, these sorts of things. Then, after we've done that, we're going to deploy the volunteers and specialist. So this is after you flip your cards, the ones you've planned. This is where you would now look on the board and say, hey, I had this card, which gives me this resource, and so forth. I always tend to put these two together. I don't know, they just concurrently work for me. Then after that, you look at objectives. So not without going into too much detail on the board, you have some kind of an emergency plan that's kind of set in place for you, which has several objectives on it. You can choose not to complete the whole thing, but you can complete maybe one objective and then move it over. And you may not get the final, what's the word I'm looking for, resource or prize or something at the end of it. If you decide to.
Whatever big reward.
Thank you. Reward is the word I'm looking for at the end. So that is at your discretion. But we also have objective cards that you can obtain. And by completing those, usually, not always, but a lot of the time, it lets you keep the card. So it's something you can use later when you're planning. But it also lets you drop one of the cubes on the map. We haven't talked about the map yet, but we're going to talk about it, well, right now. So objectives, these are the types of ones that I was just talking about there. And this moves us now into scouting. So on the board, when we start, we get to place a cube on one of the letters on the board, depending on what our emergency objective is. So it might say D to D, and you go, what does that mean? It means that you have cubes eventually that you can connect from point D to point D.
Now, even as you're talking, Mandy, I realize that we did something wrong in our play of it. That's perfect.
No.
This has been educational for me. Thank you.
So good. And I'm trying not to overload people, but there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, but this is great.
Okay, good. So on this side of the board, it's kind of sectioned off. It's hard to explain, but it looks like a network almost. And so you can basically close off certain networks. And you have these tiles that are on the board in these different networks. And basically in the scouting round, what you can do is anywhere you have a cube that's adjacent to kind of an area, you can take up these tiles. There's usually 3 in a stack, and you can choose to look at them and say, okay, these are interesting, and put them back. Or you can look at them and decide, oh, I'm actually going to complete one. How do you complete one? You need to have, the cards have these little, what do you call them? It looks almost like a locator symbol. Like, in Google Maps where it has that red kind of...
Yeah, the pin, like the little map pin that they have.
Right.
Yeah, I know
what you're talking about. So you might have a card that requires you to have 6 of these. So basically cards that have 6 of these, each card may have 1 or 2, and basically having a total of 6 of these little symbols in order to complete it. And the tile will give you some kind of bonus. It could be money. It could be a resource of your, that you are looking for, something along those lines. Without going into too much detail, having a lot of these face up different ones allow you to get points at the end of the game. So that's as much as I'll go into that part of it. But the scouting allows you to get these tiles. So this is where it becomes important later on when you're putting cubes on the board, because once you enclose an area on the board, these tiles will no longer be available, but you also get some really big points for surrounding an area. So scouting is great for getting rewards and also another way to try and get these tiles. Next is the new objectives. Getting new objectives is from, remember those 9 cards I talked about in the beginning? They cost, I think, 4 when there are 3 in a row. Then it goes down to 3 if there are 2 in a row. And then if there's only 1 in a row, I think it costs 2. These don't fill up because remember, the deck is a timer. They only fill up once a row is empty. And so once everyone's gone around and picked their new objectives, because you can only hold so many on your board, the last card of each row gets discarded. So if you had a row that literally had only 1 card in it, it would get discarded and then fill back up to 3. It's very interesting. And once you see it, it's like, oh my goodness, you can go through cards quickly. Someone can really run that deck just by grabbing lots of objectives if they have the room. Then you're going to clean up, and this involves a few things. If you have food or water, those things are gone. You cannot carry those over into the next round, so you can either, depending on what it is, you can get money, potentially get these tokens that help you in the scouting round, stuff like that. Secure districts is talking about that areas, remember I told you on the board, where you want to close them off. If somebody has surrounded an area with their cubes, those tiles that I was talking about in that area are now removed. The player gets to put a little house in that area, and that comes from their board. And underneath the house that they choose, because I think there's a few of them there, I don't know the exact number, there's a bonus. And they have little check marks, and these are something that will happen during this phase, but in the next round. Then you're going to refresh your hand, and this is where these check mark actions I was telling you about, any cards that show a check mark action on completed objectives, etc., this is where you would do them. Refreshing hands is a funny one. If you have 4 or less cards in your hand, if you haven't upped your hand limit, you have the option, we played this wrong the first time, you have the option of getting rid of your cards at this point. Sorry. No, wrong game. At this point, I'm sorry. I was like, what? No. I have too many games on the brain here. Sorry. If you have 4 or less cards, you have to look at the cards you've played in your rows under your board, and the row with the longest amount of cards now comes back into your hand. So if you were using those rows of cards to potentially fulfill an objective, meaning you had to have certain cards in a row, well, maybe you need the cards and had to start over. So that's another way to get them back into your hand. So the end of the game is triggered when the deck runs out, and then you get one more round, and then you get to do all your scoring. So basically any resources you have on the rondelle gets 2 points, converting your Hong Kong dollars, so 5 Hong Kong dollars into 1 VP, and then each card you have in your hand or your slots, those have points listed on them, and you get those points. You also get points for tiles showing up from when you were doing your scouting action. You can get points depending on how much of a set you have. So obviously a higher number of different tiles will get you more points. And that is the game. I tried to do that really fast. I know I probably forgot a few little things. I think like in the scouting action, if you do scout, you do have to toss a card out into your hospital. But little things like that will pop up in the game. This is just to give you an overall idea. Whoo, Suzanne, how did I do?
You were very thorough. You were very thorough. It's a meaty game, so it's got a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah. So if that's a lot, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's one of those games you have to see it. But I think you get the general gist. And if you've played other games from Pfister, like Mombasa, Great Western Trails, you will notice some similarities in some of the mechanics. I have not played Mombasa, but I have a lot of friends who have, and they did find some similarities in this game. Same with Great Western Trails with the set collection and that sort of thing, which I have played. I loved this game so much. I liked it the first time I played it. I liked it the second and third time I played it. I've taught it, really enjoyed it. I wasn't crazy about the art. I feel, and listen, I'm the first person to be like, I play the color black, purple in games. I like dark. This to me was a missed opportunity. If you are going to commit to a dark, like if you're going to do a dark color in the game, commit to it. Do it all the way. Make that board super dark, make the colors pop, maybe make that Blackout a little bit of a glow in the dark-esque to it. Just go all the way, and I feel like it wasn't all the way there, so it almost came off as a prototype. And I think that was a bit of a disservice, so I really wish they had just pushed it right to the end. I like the fact that the steps were easy to follow on the board. So step 1, step 2, step 3, like it was right there. They even had a little marker that you could use to move it, to show you where you were, and I thought that was really great.
We named that. We called that Pfister's Purple Power Pillar. So, because in the rules, whoever's the kind of first player gets to manage that, and it's this little purple tower, right? So we'd pass along, okay, you get Pfister's Purple Power Pillar. It was very fun to say.
I did that, and can I just tell you the fact that it's purple? Awesome.
Your favorite, yeah.
So the theme was a bit weird to me, just weird in the fact, I didn't get the connection to it. It's fine. But I expected that. So for me, I just didn't feel it really tied into the game. Sure. Maybe some people can find it. Didn't really do it for me. The game does come across as like everyone's kind of playing their solo game. It's not overly interactive. But guess what? Didn't care. I liked it. Didn't mind at all. So from this circumstance, I liked it. It really didn't bother me. So you had a little bit of interactivity when you were doing the kind of getting the objectives, I found. Because obviously, I want that one. And then someone takes it. No! And, a lot of that happening. But I didn't mind kind of being in my own world a little bit and then just having that touch of interactivity with people during that phase. I was totally great with it. So overall, very much enjoyed this game. And I highly recommend that people give it a try.
I'm glad you like it. I've only played it once, so I'm glad that you dove head in. But similarly, I'm very, very much enjoying it. The game's really in that card play and managing those discard piles, which is similar in Mombasa, where you have this discard pile management and hand management element that's just brilliant and just really well done. I see what you're saying about the board. I think you're going a little harder on it than I would, although I will say the colored spots on it, because those are relevant to when you're putting cubes out.
Yeah.
Some of the colors were a little close to each other. They were a little muted, so I can see where you're coming from there. But I gotta say, I see what you're saying about it not necessarily being hugely thematic, but how many Euro-style games have themes that aren't necessarily hugely connected to the mechanisms underneath them? A lot. And I very, very deeply appreciate that this is an unusual theme. At least it's different. If you're going to have, and I honestly don't love this term, the pasted on theme. If you're going to have that, yay for pasting on a different theme than Tom's favorite trading in the Mediterranean or something like that. So regardless of how connected you feel the theme is, I'm just glad it was it's unique. And I really appreciated that for sure. But I'm glad that you love it because a lot of what you're saying echoes how I feel about it. It's definitely a charmer, and I'm looking forward to getting more plays of it in very soon.
Yeah, and kudos, you're right. Kudos to them for at least reaching out and trying to do something a little bit different. So let's just hope that doesn't stop and we can take it a step further.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm going in a very different direction for my first games, and I'm kind of cheeky because I'm going to nudge 2 in here because these are a new series of games out of Taiwan. And on the box, it says Play Again Publishers, but then on Board Game Geek, it says Kang Swan Educational Publishing Corp., which is very austere sounding. But this is a new series of games that are designed for young children, and they are very basic, but they're also full of charm. They're very much visually engaging, and each of them centers around a different general mechanism. And I got a set of these thanks to the Taiwan Board Game Group, and I've been exploring them with my kids. And the 2 I wanted to bring up today are Going Around the City and Okay, Choom Boom, which I don't even know what that name is, but I love it. Going Around the City is thematically you've got a board with different locations and paths connecting them. And you either have train routes or bus routes, and they're very distinct from each other, so you can tell. And some stops are bus only, some stops are train only, and some stops are mix. And basically, you've got a deck of cards with train icons and bus icons, and you play a card, and then if it's a bus card with 2 icons, you get to move 2 bus spaces. Voila. And then there are some spaces around the board where when you reach them, you can put down one of these little tokens that you have. There's 2 ways you can play. You can play until you get rid of all your tokens, and whoever's the first to do that wins, and that's the more simple version. Or you can play where there are points allocated. If you reach a location first, you get more points, and then people who come after get fewer points, which is a little more strategic. It is as simple as I defined right there. Arguably, it could be on the simplicity level of Candyland, except there are more. It's an important distinction that there's an actual decision, some actual choices being made, and where and what direction you go and how you play those cards. So that's Going Around the City. I will tell you, my 6-year-old son, even though it's a very simple game, I think he likes that it's simple. He can it's like a relaxing game for him. He will not stop making me play this game. Before school in the mornings, Mom, let's play Going Around the City. And he sets it all up, and we just play it in like 10, 15 minutes. It's very simple. And it's a delight. It's a gorgeous game. It's absolutely beautiful. It comes in a fairly small tin. They are packaged in tins, but they're decent tins. They're very flat. Like they don't have embossing on it. So they lie flat. So they aren't a nightmare to store, which is my problem with tins. So that's good. And my son is just loving Going Around the City. If you are looking for a very simple game for very young players, 4-year-old, 5-year-old players, this is a great one. I really like it because you have this little tiny hand of cards, so they can manage it in their little tiny hands, and they're picking which way do they go, and they're looking around and they're figuring out what steps they have. It works, and it's a very simple introduction, and I love that. Okay, Choom Boom is a very different game. It is a game that has little round cards, and on one side of the card, there are different illustrated hand signs, like the OK, or the peace, or around the eyes, or like this winky thing. You have to look it online. It's really funny.
Like Batman?
Yeah, like that. Like you put little V's around your eyes and you wink and whatever. And there's two ways they actually have competitive and cooperative rules. We've been playing it cooperatively primarily, where you set up a pyramid of these cards and you just work down each layer of the pyramid. So at the first round, you just have one card. In the second round, you have two cards that you have to flip over, and so on down the thing. And you clap in a rhythm. And they actually recommend a metronome app to keep you on rhythm, because this is and you clap in rhythm, and then you flip over the card, and then you'll have to make the same hand symbol that matches the card at the same time. And you keep on clapping, and then if you're off rhythm, you have this little dial, and I don't know this character, what it is. You have this little dial, and he gets grumpy when you make a mistake. And so your goal is to get all the way through the pyramid before you make your little observer, your little photographer super grumpy at you. It is as light and goofy as it sounds, and we're having fun. It's one of those games. Okay, Choom Boom, we're not really playing as a game. We're doing it as an activity, and I don't really love the whole "is it a game" thing. It's a game, but we're just doing it for fun. Like, we're not even really keeping score. We just, by halfway down the pyramid, my kids are giggling so much anyway. Yeah, we're just having fun. It's adorable. It's silly. And we haven't really played. We looked at the competitive, but my son really prefers cooperative, so that's what we've been doing. So anyway, a new line of games. I'm not quite sure what the publisher's called, Play Again or Kang Swan Educational Publishing Group, but they're out of Taiwan. And, with games like Haba's really cornered the market on early development. They've got Haba, there's Peaceable Kingdom, these publishers that focus on producing games for young players. And I know a lot of you all out there are parents or want to be parents and are thinking, you love games. You're like, well, how do I bring my children into the fold on this? I think that this new line of games is right in that family with the Haba early series, with Peaceable Kingdom, with Blue Orange, and all these wonderful publishers that produce games for young children. From what I can tell with going around the city, okay, Choom Boom, they're right on that same plateau. So I definitely recommend you try to find those because they're a delight.
And how are first of all, okay, Choom Boom. I mean, the name is just hilarious. I love it. The hand signals, is it like North American standard hand symbols, or do you know what I mean? Like, these sorts of things are not the same in every country. So
it's literally illustrated. So it's very obvious what it is. It's got this cute little caricaturized hand on it that shows you exactly what you're supposed to do. So you're just mimicking the card. It's so easy to understand.
Okay, so that's what I mean, though. But is it geared toward like a certain part of the world? Like, we say like this is okay, but somewhere else in the world that's not okay.
It's definitely geared toward Western things, and there is an okay symbol. And I understand that in some countries it's also an American sign language. It's F. So
okay, well, exactly,
things like that.
Exactly.
So there is maybe some cultural context there. I suppose you could just take those out if you have a problem with any symbols, but none of them come across, certainly to my Western eyes, as a naughty gesture. Let's put it that way.
No, that's good. I know it's just in case.
But on the opposite side, we're gonna look at a couple games that are not kid friendly.
Yeah. So we're just going to take a slight pause. If you do have children listening, it's not that they're bad per se. It's just the topics of these games can be a little more adult. So I know the game that I'm going to be talking about is geared toward an 18 plus audience. So we're just going to take a moment. If there are kids or anybody listening that maybe are like, oh, this is not a theme for them, we'll give you a moment to usher them out of the room. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. So the game that I'm specifically going to be talking about is Narcos the Board Game. This is designed by Fel Barros and Renato Silva Sasdelli. The artist is Henning Ludvigsen, and the publisher is Simon Limited. It plays 2 to 5 players. It's for ages 18 and up. The price is about 47 Canadian, also 47 US. However, it is currently on pre-order, and I think they are going to be shipping out late November. So this game, and yes, I will fully admit, I loved the show Narcos, but I also watch a lot of these kind of real crime shows or things like that. So it really interests me. So this show, yes, it is a favorite of mine. And so it is based on the television series Narcos. And in the story, it's a one against many. So you have, it kind of depicts the rise and fall of El Patron. So one person acts as Patron, and the others are going to act as the DEA, Policía Nacional de Colombia, the Cali Cartel, and a guerrilla extremist group. So basically, these are the hunter factions, and you're trying to go get after El Patron. So for those of you who have seen the show, you will understand the storyline very quickly. For those of you who have not seen the show, doesn't mean you won't get it, doesn't mean you can't play it. You just may have to wait till it folds out a little bit and say, oh, okay, I see what's happening. Basically, you have a very well-known drug dealer. There are other drug dealers that are trying to get him, or the police that are trying to get him, but just in different ways. So these are the kind of things that are happening in the game. So the person who plays El Patron has a lot on their plate. They are definitely playing cards because they're hiding. They don't want to be caught. El Patron wants to continue growing their, I don't know what they call it in the game, but we're just going to say coca for now. Yeah, and it is depicted in the game using little white cubes. So there's definitely those plants show up on the board. You know, airports can be blocked and things like that. And basically the person playing Patron is trying to hide from everybody, but still while trying to maintain their business. So they have a board where they can implement using people who are working for them. They also have abilities they can use from a deck, from a hand of cards that they have. And we're trying to stop or kind of get these people off the board because they can push the track. It's actually very funny. It's a rosary. And at the end is a picture of El Patron. So basically, once it gets to that, he has to say, oh, I win. So basically, by having these people on the board and not kind of getting them off or allowing them to make deliveries and whatnot, we're pushing forward on that track in the game. So we are trying to win. So we are trying to catch El Patron in order to win the game. All right. If El Patron player manages to complete their secret objectives without being captured, they win the game. All right. So it's hard because you think, oh, it should be easy. No, sometimes the person playing a Patron can be very tricky and hard to find. The person we played with, I think, did a great job. But because I'm a fan of the show, she is a fan of the show, we were like in it to win it. And I think we were on the same wavelength. And yes, we did catch Patron. So that's the general gist of the game. If you're familiar with Fury of Dracula, Letters to Whitechapel, those types of games, this is a very similar mechanic. It just has a more adult theme. You do not need to be familiar with the television show. I definitely made my friends watch a little something before we played who were not familiar with the show so they could get into the ambiance because I really enjoy it. But it's not a requirement. And they actually really enjoyed it, even though a few of them were not familiar with it. I enjoyed it. And like I said, I also love the show. So for me, it was like that much more. I personally am not a big fan of One Against Many. But I do have a soft spot for Fury of Dracula, which I really enjoyed. But I never want to be Dracula. Much like in this game, I have no desire to be El Patron. It's a lot of pressure and gives me anxiety. So definitely someone who likes that type of role where they, like that hide and seek element. Great. This will be just like Fury of Dracula, that sort of thing. You will love it. It is an adult theme, so it is definitely geared towards a certain type of market. Again, doesn't have to be someone who's seen the show, but it does deal with adult theme things like drugs. I think I touched on this being similar play to Fury of Dracula, Letters to Whitechapel. It's one of those things, if you don't have enough players to play the hunters in the game, you'll have people taking on more than one character. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I understand you need that to drive the game. Mm-hmm. But I like games where I don't have to pick up 2 or 3 other characters. For me, I like to focus on one thing and just go for it. But in this particular game, it does require all of these things to be played during the game, much like the show. All of these people were characters in the show that needed to make the story happen. So if that's not for you, you may not like that part of it. It's just one of those games where if One Against Many is not your thing, this isn't going to change your mind. The theme is there. If you like the show, oh my gosh, you'll be like, yeah, definitely true to the show, true to the characters. I get it. I love it. If you didn't watch the show, it's great. But if you're a fan of One Against Many, I think you will enjoy it. Again, just barring the adult theme. The person who does play El Patron, it's a lot. You've got a lot to remember. You've got secret objectives. You've got cards. You've got other people that you're deploying. It's like you're playing 3 different people, even though you are one person. So you definitely have a lot on your plate, but doable if that's the way your brain works and something you like. So overall, I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more because I'm a huge fan of the show. Sure. And I also had a really good group. We played with the full player count, so no one was doubling up. And the game plays, I found, in a shortish amount of time, an hour and a half. But if you have someone who has or is AP prone, this may not be the game for them. So, because yes, those are the people that will make the game kind of seem a bit longer. I'm very decisive. We come up with a plan. We're all on the same page. Let's do it. If you have someone who likes a long time to think, this may not be the type of game for you. So overall, Narcos, I enjoyed it. Any interest there for you, Suze, on that one?
Honestly, not inherently. I don't mind one versus many games though, so that doesn't faze me at all. But I actually have no interest in that theme at all.
Yeah,
at all. And I appreciate that for the fans out there. It's probably amazing, and more power to you. And that's awesome. It's not my thing, and there are a ton of awesome games out there. This may be one of them, but I'll probably look at that. There's probably other games that I would get to the table before that one, I will admit.
We appreciate your honesty, but I think you're right. I definitely think if you're a fan of the show, you will definitely get a little bit more out of it, but it doesn't mean you have to be. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. And I understand that. I think that's the same of games like Battlestar Galactica or Buffy or
Firefly, any of those shows.
Aliens games and all those legendary games where, of course, if you're a fan of the IP, it makes sense. I get that. Well, on my dark side, I got to play Escape Tales: The Awakening. This is kind of a puzzle hunt or escape room style game in a box. Similar. We spent a lot of time talking about, is it like Time Stories? Is it like Exit and Unlock? And well, we'll talk about that. So Escape Tales: The Awakening is by Jacob Caban, Matt Dembeck, and Bartosz Idzlikowski. And the art's by Magdalena Klepacz and Pavel Nizolik. And it's been published by Board and Dice originally, and then I'm sure that they're going to get distribution galore because, spoiler alert, and this will be the only spoiler.
Yes,
it's kind of awesome.
Okay, good. Because I'm like, I haven't played it yet, so shh.
Yeah. No, exactly. And similar to a game like Time Stories, there is a narrative, and I could spoil it for you, but I will not do that. That is not the intent of this. So I'm just going to give you an idea of the mechanisms more than anything else, because that's not spoilery. And it's one of the reasons I really like this experience. In Escape Tales: The Awakening, thematically, story-wise, you are the parent of a young girl who has slipped into a coma, and you're trying to figure out how to... the doctors don't know what's going on, and a potential solution presents itself, and you decide to pursue that. As a parent, I've realized this is the same thing with Captive, the Choose Your Own Adventure, the adventure graphic novels from Van Ryder Games. The theme with an imperiled child, where your character is trying to save that imperiled child, I gotta say, it hits me pretty hard. I get very tense about that because I just personalize it way too much. So that's what Escape Tales has. So it instantly ratchets up that tension for me, and thematically, that can be fairly heavy. So you're going through this game, and what I can tell you is the mechanisms, the core working system of this game, we absolutely loved. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into a room, and it's similar to Time Stories, where you have a deck of cards that represents a room. In this game, you're going to get cards that represent a room, and you put them out on this little board that's designed for it. And the board has 1, 2, 3, 4 down the column and A, B, C, D across the top. So it forms a grid. And then you get a little map card that matches that grid. And the way this works is you get action tokens, and you put an action token on the room card to show which quadrant or which little zone you're investigating. And then you find the matching card or the matching snippet in the book, the adventure book. It'll say, P35. And then you read P35, and it'll tell you what you see in that zone. It may lead you to other clues. You may have to put other pieces together, all sorts of stuff. But this action, the card system with the room and the zones and the action tokens, I gotta say, this system is wonderful. I just love it. It worked. It just worked. There was a lot of tension and stress at moments where you're trying to figure out, well, where do we use this last action token and what looks more like a priority? There was one moment where there were two corners of the room. We're like, oh, well, it's probably that, but maybe it's that because there's similar things. And then we went to one zone and it ended up being, we kind of wish we'd gone to the other one and all this other stuff, but we're out of action tokens. And moments like that happen for sure. And that was great. So from a mechanical point of view, if you're interested in the kind of time stories, exit, unlock kind of zone, you should be looking at Escape Tales, especially if thematically you're not upset by darker themes. What I want to tell you are a few things I wish I had known going into it. One, we looked at the box and we're so excited to dig in. We kind of glossed over the 180 to 360 minute time listed on the box. The game literally tells you this is a 3 to 6 hour experience. And the game is correct. We were so excited, we just kind of forgot that. And I will say that we wish we had broken it out into 2. We pile drive through. It took us just over 5 hours. And we were in a situation where we weren't expecting a 5 hour. We weren't prepped and kind of mentally geared up for a 5 hour game experience. So we wish in retrospect that we had broken it up. And part of the reason why we wish we'd broken it up is this is a very puzzle heavy game. Whereas in a game like Time Stories, you're kind of exploring and mulling, and there's a lot of reading, a lot of story elements and things like that. In Escape Tales, your brain is working puzzles practically nonstop. There are really nice story elements, don't get me wrong. There's definitely a narrative pull through throughout the whole experience. But working your brain that way for 3, 4, 5 hours, it's exhausting. You're tired at the end of it. And that's where we get. And we personally felt like the puzzles got harder. Now, maybe that was us getting tired near the end. So they weren't getting harder. It was just our brains were more tired, but we felt like they were getting harder and we were tired. So just near the end of the game, we were tired. We were still liking the game, but if we'd broken it up into 2 sessions, I think we would have been better off. So that's warning number 1. I talked about the theme. It does get pretty dark. We've played lots of dark games. It's not upsetting or bothersome, and I wouldn't call it like offensive or anything like that. It's just dark. And if that's not your thing, it's not your thing. If it is, you're going to love it. Mandy, I think you'll love it. And then, yeah, I think actually that's it. Break it up into sessions. Be prepared for some heavy puzzling. Because exit and unlock, there's a lot of puzzling in those two, but they're 1 hour. You know, you go hard for an hour and you're done. In Escape Tales, you go hard for 3 hours and then you're starting to feel it. And then you go into the 4th hour or the 5th hour. And, you know, but I got to say, the narrative pulled all the way through. The puzzles were interesting. The art was great. A little scary at times, but the art was great. I love it. I love the system. I want more. I'm very excited to see what they do with this system in the future because I thought it worked so well for this kind of thing. It was a huge, huge hit. And there's no destruction. So it is replayable. So either you could hand it off to another group who hasn't played it and they can play it in full, or we can play it again because there is a choose your own adventure. There will be moments in the game where you have to make a decision, A or B. And presumably that forks you down a different path. And there's a few points during that game. So I know my group is planning, after we've had a little bit of break, we're planning on going back and trying to choose different paths to see where that leads us because we know that there are different endings that we have not seen. So I love that there's even replayability built into this one as well.
I'm excited to try this one. I know I didn't even think of the time when you mentioned how long it was. I'm like, what? Really? I didn't even look. I was like ready to play it. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to need like a day for this one just to get it done. But if you're saying break it up, I think that's what we might do because I have a few kind of campaigny type games on the go right now. So it might be good to kind of just drop that into a game day and then come back to it another time. So I'm excited. It looks great. The cover was just sufficiently creepy enough for me. Like, oh my gosh, it's dark. I'm excited. I know that sounds really wrong, but I just like those types of games.
For sure. And I think if you have somebody who's really good at math, bring them along.
Okay, that is good.
I hope that's not too spoilery.
That is certainly not me. So I'll make sure to have, someone like Michael or Ashley around. I feel Ashley is going to be really good with that.
So that was Escape Tales: The Awakening, a huge hit for me.
All right. So for those of you who ushered children or anybody out of the room that doesn't like dark themes, now's the time to bring him back in. because we're going to be talking about dinosaurs. All right, I think I paused long enough. I'll jump in. So I'm going to talk about Duelosaur Island. So this is designed by Ian Moss. Artist is Kwanchai Moria, Peter Walken, Anthony Walken. Publisher is Pandasaurus Games. So this retails for about 31 Canadian. I couldn't seem to locate a price US, but I would assume it's about the same. And this was a Kickstarter, so people may have started getting their Kickstarters already. It is a pre-order, however, online till December 2018. It's a 2-player, so don't get it confused with Dinosaur Island, which is a 2 to 4. This is Duelosaur, dual meaning 2, and it's at 30 to 45 minutes. Something to talk about quickly. We had some promo cards at the convention, and you might recognize some of the faces on them. Myself and Suzanne, Tom and Eric, and Sam and Z. Those cards are solely for Dinosaur Island. So just in case anyone was trying to play them with Duelosaur, they will not work. So in Duelosaur Island, very similar to Dinosaur Island, the companies you have are trying to get your dinosaur park happening, but now the company's split. It's like, oh no. So now it's like you're rivaling. You've split off into 2 of your own kind of dinosaur companies, but you're rivals. So now you're going to see who has the better park, right? So what I like about this game is that the cards serve in a variety of different ways, I should say. They have a play to create dinosaurs, and you've got a way to create some attractions. So you'll notice that the theming is very similar if you've played Dinosaur Island, but it does work slightly differently. So I'm doing this off the top of my head because I was like, should I go in the rulebook? No, I'm going to do it from the way that I played it. They break it up a little bit. So in this game, you have your own board, so they look very similar to the ones you have in Dinosaur Island, where you have your basic DNA, your advanced DNA, and this is where you can track that because this is what you're going to need to create your dinosaurs. And then this board is basically your keyboard, and this is where you're going to be using the cards, tucking them on top, give you creation of dinosaurs. Tucking them on the bottom shows the bottom of a card, which shows a park. So amusement park, something that's in the amusement park rides. You have the merchandise, you have the food. These are things that peek out the bottom. And depending on which one you have will depend on the kind of bonus that it may give you later on. You still have specialist cards in the game as well. And specialist cards are the type of cards that are going to give you some kind of, special bonus or effect throughout the game. It's pretty straightforward.
What? No.
I know.
Really?
Who would have thought? And then so you still have another, so it's not as big a footprint setup as in Dinosaur Island, but you do have a board where you're going to be rolling dice. And this is where we're going to be able to draft from dice. And we're also going to be drafting these cards that you can use for dinosaurs or for attractions in your park. And we also have another board that checks your excitement score. That's what happens when you make dinosaurs. You get excitement, which is good. And this is what's going to give you points or visitor points that basically people coming to your park. So this is how you get your VPs. And we also have another little track that gives you some bonuses. So quickly in the game, you have an income phase, and this is the phase that gives you money. So basically we start off with a base 3, but if you have any attractions, like a merchandise attraction for every one you have, it gives you additional money, as well as any specialist that may give you money, or I had one which allowed me to roll a die, and if I rolled certain things, I got lots of money. And then we have the drafting phase. The drafting phase is interesting because the first player is the one that gets to place the dice on the board. But before that, you get to draft cards. So these are the cards that you're going to be using to either make dinosaurs or to make attractions. And you can get more cards based on amusement kind of rides that you have showing in your park will allow you to draw additional cards. So everybody takes turns doing that. And then the player who is designated first player gets to roll some dice. I think it ends up being 5. And they get to place them on the board. Underneath, they have these kind of bonuses showing. And they get to place the dice. It could be DNA or something like this on the board. The second player then gets to choose first. So the first player gets to choose how they're arranged. And then the second player gets to pick first. And then they go back and forth choosing between specialist cards and dice that you can add into your park to help you out. Whatever's left, if you're familiar with Dinosaur Island, you've got your threat levels. So on the die or on the card will be a certain threat level, and that's going to be added. So you have to remember that when you're creating dinosaurs, they increase your threat level plus whatever was left over in this drafting phase. Then we move into the building phase where you're going to create dinosaurs. You're going to build your amusement parks or merchandise or food, whatever you want to put in your park there. You also have an opportunity to increase your security, because if your security If you don't have enough and it's less than the threat level, you're getting some people eaten. And that is not always a good thing at your mark. You want those points, so don't get people eaten. That's bad. After you've checked for all that, basically you're going to go into the cleanup phase where that happens. You're checking the threat level, lose visitors. Well, we don't want that, but it does happen if your security level is too low. And then sometimes you can add visitors based on your excitement levels if you created some dinosaurs. So the game ends depending on the length of game. You had to choose at the beginning a short, medium, or long game. So first player to reach either 25, 35, or 45 points, depending if you pick short, medium, or long. So you probably noticed there's a lot of similarities. I didn't go through everything. Similarities to Duelosaur Island, but it is different. And I think the cards, the multi-use of the cards really show that, and the way the dice are used. So I actually had played this as a prototype, and they didn't change too much. I actually really like it. I have Duelosaur Island. I also backed the expansion, which I'm waiting for, and I have this game. And I like it, and it's different enough for me to keep both in my collection. I've done a playthrough on the Dice Tower with Michael with 2-player of Duelosaur Island, and you can feel the dynamic is different. Still works with Duelosaur Island, but it is different. This is definitely geared toward 2 players. Of course, I like the art and the theme. I liked it from day one. I love the colors. It's amazing. I wasn't crazy about the cards that decide the length of the game. So whether it's a short game, medium game, or long game, I just looked at it and I'm like, either it was just written, I was a little confused reading it, or I was like, okay, like it just seemed a little silly. Like we played the medium game, I know, the other day, and it's just like, okay, fine. Like you can use this type of attraction as this type of attraction in the setup, and then that was the end of it. Like it just seemed a little random and strange to me. So I wasn't crazy about it, but it could have been just that length of game that we didn't like. Other than that, I really enjoyed the game. It's in a smaller box, which is nice. Still a little heavy, but it doesn't have those. I don't have the ones with the amazing coins. Maybe someone else does. I just pulled them out of my Duelosaur Island one. So overall, I enjoyed it, and I do like the fact that it is geared toward 2-player, but you can feel it as a slightly tighter game at 2 players.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm really excited. I'd love to try this. I love Duelosaur Island, and same with you. The theme and stuff like that just sounds. I'm into it. So that's cool. I'm really glad that you liked it, and it's cool to hear you say it's different enough. Yeah. And that's exciting to hear. Well, I'm going to wrap it up with a game that, as some of you know, I am very much into researching and learning about games out of Taiwan, Korea, Japan, from the Asian markets and from the Asian side. I just think there's interesting things happening over there, and that sometimes you get games that come at game mechanisms or themes differently and putting it all together. And I find that really exciting. So going to Essen, one of the things I love about going to Essen is that a lot of these Asian publishers go to Essen, even the ones that don't necessarily come to US conventions that I can more easily attend. So that's one of the missions I had attending Essen, was picking up all these wonderful games from all these great Asian publishers. So I've started digging into them. And the first one I wanted to talk about today is Layers. Layers is published by Happy Baobab. Now, Happy Baobab did a game last year that I was a huge fan of called Sunny Day, which was a little tile laying game. Huge fan of that one. And I heard it got picked up and it'll be more widely available. And I'm ecstatic about that because it's a delightful little game. And again, it did something interesting with tile laying and the way that worked. Well, Layers is a very different game. This is, and Happy Baobab also did like Fold It and things like that with the, so they're just very puzzly. Layers is one of those puzzly style games. It's designed by Dave Choi and Johan Go. The art is by Agsti Im and Jang Sun Park. And what this is, it's a puzzle game. So every player gets a set of these square cardboard sheets. They're like, I don't know, maybe 6 by 6, 6 inches by 6 inches. And they have a cutout in the middle. They have some kind of cutout and they're colored different colors. They're pretty just simple graphically. And then there's 3 different decks of cards, 3, 4, and 5. And these are difficulties as well. 3 is the simplest, 5 is the most difficult. And that's because of the number of layers involved. The 3 cards all require 3 different layers, and the 5, I think that makes sense. From a mechanism point of view or from a gameplay point of view, there's a timer. So I know that it's going to turn a lot of people off, but stick with me. There's a timer, you flip it over, and then you're all rushing. You flip over this card, and you're all rushing to make your layers match the look of the card. So you're using those layers, flipping them around, twisting them, turning them, flipping the layers, like how deep they are in your stack to make it match the picture perfectly. If you're the first one, you grab this tile that indicates you were the first, then the second person grabs the third person, and the round is over. And then you check your pattern to see, did you actually manage to match what was on the card? If you did, points are allocated by first, second, third, and you do it again. It's got tension. It's interesting. And it is harder than it seems. You may breeze through a couple and then you get totally flummoxed by other ones. Some of the colors are intentionally close. There's like a dark orange and a medium orange on the same card. Totally intentional. The cards will have a single shape cut out of it, obviously, but if you flip it over, the color pattern on the back side is completely different than the color pattern on the front side. And again, that's completely intentional. So as you're twisting these layers, you may realize you've got the shapes looking right, but their colors are off. Oh, I've got to flip this over because it's the other side, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's diabolical. It's absolutely diabolical. Those number 5s are so tough and so challenging. And personally, I just eat it up. I just love it. And thankfully, a lot of my friends were really into it as well. And that works out great. So Layers has that timed element. It is super duper puzzly. I think it's wonderful. Now, I say stick with me because it is puzzly. And if you want to ratchet it back a little bit and ease up like I did with my kids, double the timer. Or take the timer out, or take the gamification out, and just take a stack of cards and try to work through them, and just for fun, as a more of an activity, really, than a game. And that's what I did with my kids. I doubled the timer, and we only did 3s. My son really struggled. He's 6, but he got a little bit of frustration with even the double timer. My daughter was doing quite well. She's just turned 10. But then we're like, well, let's just do it. And I actually worked with my son, helping him understand and showing him how it worked. And it was fascinating to watch his brain click in and start to get it and start to look at the layers and the shapes and the colors in different ways. And we had a lot of fun just doing that. So I think Layers is one of those things, you can play it as a game. It's a total blast. I think there's value in it in exploring the components in different ways too, as I have with my kids. And we've been really, really enjoying it. So that is Layers from Happy Baobab. Similar, Fold It got picked up, Sunny Day got picked up. I'm really hoping somebody picks up Layers because it's a clever, clever game. And depending on how your brain works, it is really challenging. And it's great.
I know it's one that I wanted to pick up, but the bag was a little full, but it looked really interesting. And some of these types of games, I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's really, they can be tough, but I think it's almost like really good for it's like brain exercise, but fun. So
absolutely
something that totally would interest me. So definitely want to look at.
Hopefully it'll get picked up so we can get you a copy easily.
Yes, crossing my fingers.
All right, enough with the analog. Let's talk the digital side.
Let your fingers do the walking in. Tap that app.
All right, it's time to get digital. Okay, that was really bad.
Oh my gosh. Mandy.
I'm so sorry. All
you
right,
should be.
Now I guess we're going to talk apps, but I don't have an app this week.
What? Why not?
So long story short, I tossed the iPhone and I am now an Android user.
Say what? That's a big deal.
I saw the light.
You're a switcher.
So unfortunately, by doing that, I no longer have apps on my phone and I need to repurchase or get them all put on my phone. So, and I'm in the middle of transitioning to a different iPad. So long story short, I have no apps to talk about, but I know you have a really good one that you want to tell us about.
For sure. Well, and I will say that the good thing is going into the holidays, a lot of app developers put their apps on sale.
In Canada?
So keep your eye out for that.
Okay, Canada, US. This is exciting.
I think they go on sale. Obviously, the prices may be a little bit different, but
sure.
At least they're on sale. So keep your eye out for that. And I will say, I applaud you. I have a new phone. A new iPhone. I do not like it at all, but I didn't I was not bold enough like you to switch to Android. So I respect and admire you. I'm really interested to hear about your experience with this in the future as you kind of settle in.
I'm going to throw it out there. Just anybody else who's looking at phones. I ended up getting a Huawei P20 Pro. The pictures are fantastic. I won't go into a whole sales spiel on it, but it's really good. So,
okay. And this will be great because I have an iPhone, you have an Android phone now, so we can see if there's any substantive differences between availability or experience. I would assume not. Maybe sometimes availability, though, so we'll have to keep our eye on that.
Absolutely.
Well, I do have an app because I was not as brave as Mandy. So I wanted to talk about the Isle of Skye app. This is a Kennerspiel de Jahres winning game designed by, Alexander Pfister and Andreas Pelikan, that old AA team there. The art is by Clemens Franz. It's set in Scotland where you're creating Scottish kingdoms, I guess. And it's just really charming art. I love Clemens Franz as an artist, so I'm always charmed by it. And the developer on this is Digidiced. It's available on iOS, Android, and Steam, which is a standard for Digidiced. And you can play cross-platform, which is really nice. So, Mandy, if we can get you a copy of Isle of Skye, we can play against each other if we wanted to because you create an account. And I love that, right? It's like $5 US on iOS and Android and $10 on Steam because Steam games are usually priced higher, which is a whole different discussion. But Isle of Skye is a tile laying game and it's fairly standard. You've got sheep and cattle and different buildings and boats and mountains and grass and all this other stuff. And the rules for laying the tiles are fairly standard for a tile laying game. Line up mountains to mountains and water to water. Roads you don't have to line up, but you get benefits if you do. There's adjacency things and stuff like that. You score different things. Isle of Skye won the Kennerspiel, I think, for two primary reasons. One, the way you get those tiles is this interesting market where everybody gets 3 tiles. You secretly mark one that's going to get discarded, and then you set the price for the other 2 that you want to sell. The trick is that if an opponent does not buy the tile, you must buy the tile with your own funds, and then you get to keep it and place it in your little kingdom that you're building up. But sometimes you don't want to. Sometimes you want to keep that tile, so you have to set the price high enough that you get to keep it, but low enough that you don't go broke. I love that market. That market is awesome. I personally am very fond of it. The other little twist in it that I really like is that there's like 16 or 20 scoring tiles, but you play with 4 of them in a game. So there's a lot of variability in how you prioritize and things like that. Those scoring tiles really can change up the tone of how you play. And I like the rhythm of how they score. First round, you score the A tile. Second round, you score the B tile. Third round, you score the B and C tile. You get like these combos. So by the end of the game, every tile scores twice. I think that's how that works. But tiles will score twice and kind of prioritizing tiles early game, late game, that kind of thing. A lot is going on in a relatively simple tile laying game. And I think that's why it won the Kennerspiel. Great game. The app version, Digidiced, is they're really cementing their position as a top tier developer. They did a great job. Digidiced has some standard kind of UI interface pieces that they use, like in terms of next buttons and menus and things like that. So if you've played a Digidiced game before, like Patchwork or Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small, this is going to feel familiar interface wise to you, which is great. If you haven't, I think it's consumable. There is an interactive tutorial that teaches you the game and the interface, and I think you get used to it pretty quickly. So I think all of that is grand. I'm trying to think of any complaints I have. The AI, I think depending on who you're talking about, the AI is too easy or too hard. I think hard is definitely a hard AI. The trouble with creating AIs for a game like this is that it's very hard to mimic the way a human would prioritize. And how high would they set that tile? Would they actually try to keep this one, or would they just give it up and keep the money? And I think that those kinds of AIs are actually quite challenging to program. Thankfully, Digidiced has honestly one of the best AI programmers in the business. So I think that they've done a really good job here. And so it has 3 different AIs. You can play, pass, and play, that kind of thing. And I do think, though, where it really shines is because you have that online play. Like, Mandy, you and I playing online against each other async, that is a blast. Totally great experience. That's how I prefer to play. But all in all, Isle of Skye, the app, I really like it. I think it's polished. It's a great game. and it's implemented with a really strong app that's available cross-platform. And I definitely recommend people check it out.
I would be interested in trying the app because I'll be honest, I've only played this game once, and there's a reason for that.
Ooh.
Yeah, I did not love it. So,
that's okay.
I hope this doesn't mean one and done, but we'll see. But I'd be curious to see how it plays on the app because I do sometimes
Let's
have
do
a
that.
different
I want to know. We won't count digital plays for one and done.
No, we won't. No, we won't. We'll leave it. We'll leave everyone hanging.
There you go. Well, Isle of Skye, both as a game and an app, is a recommend for me. We'll see what Mandy says about it sometime in the future.
Q&A.
All right, folks, it's been a little while since we had a Q&A because with conventions and things like that, it kind of throws schedules off. So we want to just catch up on a couple of questions from the mailbag. Let's see here. Kevin asks, longtime listener, first-time caller. Well, thank you, Kevin. Nice to hear from you. Kevin says, I heard on a recent podcast that you are into heavy Euro games. I was a little surprised by that, and I'm not sure why. Mandy's definitely talking to you. I'm generally a mid-weight gamer, but recently got Scythe and really enjoyed my first plays at Duelosaur Island. Is that a Euro? Anyway, I'd like to get into more heavy Euros, and I figured to see if you had any recommendations. Themes and visuals are very important to me, which might roll out Blackout, which might be why a lot of Euros don't appeal to me much. Food Chain Magnet is staggeringly ugly, according to Kevin. But Terra Mystica seems promising. So, Mandy, I feel like that's geared towards you.
I think definitely a little bit. So just on the note of heavy Euro games that I enjoy them, I get that a lot. A lot of people are surprised. And I think it's because when I started doing things on Dice Tower, it was really focused on lunchtime kind of games and they were short. So yes, I do love a good heavy Euro. So definitely, I see that you've picked some really good ones here. Terra Mystica, which is really good. And then they recently came out with that other one, Gaia Project, which has basically a similar feel to Terra Mystica, but it has more of a space type theme to it. And I know that's getting a lot of good reviews. I personally love Caverna. I know it doesn't really reach outside of the, farming, maybe building mines. It has some, expeditions that you can go on. I love it. It's actually one of my favorite games. Food Chain Magnet, to me, believe it or not, I actually find it thematic. I may have people disagree with me, but it takes place in a time where they are using the colors and that you would find during the 1950s, 1960s, when you had the burger joints. I work in HR. They literally use a kind of organizational chart in the game, and that's how kind of a company would work. I personally find it thematic. I also personally like the way it's done, and I like the art, but I understand it's not for everybody. So to me, that is a good one. Again, another one of my favorites. Theme in a Euro, difficult, because a lot of them, unless it's farming and more farming, or if you're Feld, Trajan seems to be a really popular thing, or that kind of Roman appeal to the game. That's generally the way it goes. We were just talking earlier about Blackout, Alexander Pfister game, where they tried to kind of branch out and do a bit of a theme. And what was the first thing I said? I found the theme a little weird. You know what I mean? I didn't feel there was a connection. It's difficult. I find it's very difficult, and you have to give kudos to people who try. I personally can't think of many thematic Euros. But for me, if it's a little wild and crazy and going with the game, I think it's great. But you actually pinpointed some really good ones. You also make mention of Scythe is not personally one of my favorites, but I know a lot of people really like it. So this is probably one you might like. A lot of people are really big fans of, what's that other T1? Terraforming Mars is another popular one that people tend to like. Duelosaur Island, is it a Euro? This is a discussion Suzanne and I were talking about, thinking potentially for something coming up on Victory Points.
Yeah, we should do a Victory Points on this, on a couple things. I think thematic Euros would be an interesting discussion. Yeah. And what that really means. And I also think that there'd be an interesting discussion around what constitutes a heavy game. I know Tom has kind of elbowed me a couple of times when I've described a game as medium, and he goes, "That's a heavy game, Suzanne."
Really?
And he kind of side eyes me with his bright red hat on, and I glare back at him. And so I think that's because I would argue Duelosaur Island, I wouldn't consider it super heavy.
No, it's not.
But
it's not at all.
It's got a lot of moving pieces, but does that constitute heavy? What constitutes a heavy game?
Yeah.
And I think that would be a fun discussion too. So, Kevin, I think if nothing else, you are inspirational for a couple of victory point segments coming up.
Absolutely. So I'm going to throw out another game thematically. Well, it is what it is. But Feast for Odin is beautiful. It's a good game. And it's nice and crunchy.
And I would definitely rate that in the heavier zone for sure.
All right, so let's skip on over to David. And David is asking about apps. So I think we're looking at you, Suzanne, but let's see what David has to say. I know that you like playing board game apps, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts about the recent changes to the Ascension app. They did a pretty big UI and graphics overhaul, which received a lot of criticism for being buggy, slow, and just being worse than the previous version. They've since put out another update, potentially in response to the criticism, and are working on some fixes. I'd love to know your thoughts, both about Ascension, but more generally about improvements to apps that are nothing of the sort, and about old apps that are no longer available, like the original Carcassonne. And so now they did mention Android here, and I know that might be difficult for you, but even if you could just give us an overall opinion on what you think.
Sure. I mean, I don't have an Android device, but I know exactly what David is talking about. I have read plenty of reports on the Ascension app, and I have a lot of friends. I have a couple of friends. For example, Tony from the Rolling Dice Taking Names podcast is a huge Ascension app player, and I've seen complaints come from that side of from that little group of friends as well about that. And it's unfortunate, especially because Ascension was such a well-loved app, had tons of expansions, and really stood the test of time relative to the duration of apps, board game apps life cycles. It's disappointing that they had that trouble. That's a tough one. And you also talk about, David, apps that are improvements, but they aren't actually improvements, or about old apps that are no longer available, which is a pain point to me. And in the iOS world, they had the 32-bit to 64-bit conversion, which left a lot of unsupported apps, and then they were killed on your device. So you still technically own them, but you can't play them. They won't load. And that's super disappointing as well. I will say that with apps, with Ascension, I don't know the whole story behind the scenes, but I think that when you have one group that owns the development and you have another group trying to take that over, there's going to be a lot of challenges in there. I work in a technology sector. Inheriting code is one of the biggest nightmares for any development shop, so I can't even imagine what they were dealing with, whether they had to start from scratch or inherited code and just didn't know how to work in it. So I can see where a lot of problems are there. There's not a lot you can do once you've put your money into the app other than to hope that they continue to support it and hope to continue to improve it. You can give them feedback. I always encourage providing constructive feedback. There are real people making these products. They are really, honestly, I don't know too many people who aren't trying their best to do what's right by the game or the experience, and just stuff happens. So you can give them feedback so they understand where they can prioritize their time, but once you've put your money into it, you just got to kind of cross your fingers and hope. As far as apps that are no longer available, I can think of a number of games, Zularetto, Time Stories. In fact, I had an entire video review of Time Stories ready to go, and I was looking it up to figure out how to link to it in my little review of it.
No.
And the app was gone. So it is hugely disappointing when that happens. Unfortunately, a lot of the development shops are small that are creating these. They're either a labor of love and a small developer reaches out to the board game IP owner and cuts a one-off deal, which doesn't mean you're not going to get a great app, but it does mean that long-term supportability, especially when devices change every 6 months, when platforms change every 3 months, it's really hard. I mean, think about developers in the iOS world having to deal with the kind of the rectangular screen, and now Apple comes out with this 10 view where you have these weird bars on top and all this. It's so challenging and labor intensive to keep up with these apps, and there's not a lot of money in it from that point of view, because we're not Angry Birds.
Right.
We're not Clash of Clans. You can make a profit on board game apps, but it's not necessarily that huge cash cow that people kind of have that perception about apps when they see all these other mass market apps. Board game apps are still very niche. So I hear you. I feel your pain, David. I wish it was otherwise, but that's kind of where we're at. I hope that doesn't mean that you give up on digital app ports, though.
Did they ever fix Stone Age? I know that one was a...
They did.
They did fix it. Okay, well, there you go. That's a silver lining in the clouds.
Yep. Stone Age was, absolutely good point. Stone Age was one that disappeared with that 32-bit to 64-bit conversion. They did, out of nowhere, I was not expecting, they did update it, so it's playable again, and that's great, because the Stone Age app is delightful.
Okay.
All right, moving away from digital and pointing the finger squarely at you, Mandy.
Oh, no.
Dun, dun, dun. Jim writes in, Mandy, I briefly met you at Gen Con, and we talked about Thunderstone Quest.
Yeah.
Have you been playing the scenarios? If so, how do you feel about the game after more plays? I know you wanted to, and they were talking about the base games. Actually, the base game I've seen online in stores now, so you should be able to, or maybe it's pre-ordered in stores right now. So Jim's saying that they know the base game will be released in December, and the Kickstarter will deliver in the spring. The most recent Kickstarter will deliver in the spring. So basically, Jim wants to know how you doing on that Thunderstone Quest, Mandy.
Well, I'm getting a big F right now for fail. So it's really hard for me to play any type of campaign type games because obviously you have to play with the same group, and trying to getting us all together has been rather difficult. So we've only played 2 of the games. I have not given up hope. I absolutely will keep playing. We were just talking about it. So I think after PAX, we're going to try and get in at least 2 or 3 more plays of it to see how it progresses. So I'm so sorry to say that I don't have an update for you, but it is still on the docket to keep going through it. And I would like to do it before the, the expansion comes out, because the person who worked on the expansion actually lives in my hometown. So I would have access to it if we can get through the game. So Jim, this is to say, yes, it is a painful crawl at the moment because I've been really busy, but the plan is to finish it, at least to finish the base game. But first 2 games went really well. We had a good time. It's light. It's fun. If that's all you're looking for, this is exactly what you will get. So yeah, I think playing with my group's really fun, and we're looking forward to getting to it. So thanks so much.
All right. And wrapping up, we got one more question from Jason, who says, I'm listening to the podcast, and I've heard you touch on a couple of things. You said that you were or are a teacher, and that you play games with coworkers. With that in mind, could you recommend some games that might be good to use in professional development for teachers? We have metacognition and critical thinking as school goals, and I would like to use board games to introduce the staff to benefits of using board games in the classroom. Oh, Jason, you're awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, have you used board games to teach professional development concepts before? And do you have any that you suggest to be useful or fun to their professional development days?
So board games for me, so let's just start off by saying, yes, I am a teacher, but not in the same sense. I used to be a school teacher. Now I work for the federal government. So I teach military and civilians. So we do courses like performance management and things like that. And yes, we do use board games in our classes. I just use them a little differently. So if I'm trying to teach a concept, I may use a simple board game that they can pick on quickly, but it's proving a point of, let's say, communication versus me just giving them a game. Okay, great. You're going to be the manager. This person's the employee. But basically, you're teaching the game to the employee as the manager, and the employee is taking it in. So they're learning the game. Here you go. Great. Go at it. And then I follow up by saying, how was that activity? Did you find it difficult to teach that game? Because I didn't really preface it with anything. So I use it in that sense. So it's a game that they'll still enjoy, but I actually have a point to prove, and I'll use a very simple game to do it. So something that might be like an icebreaker, we'll do those too. So it's a little different the way that I'm using them here. And then the games that I use at work with coworkers are generally not games that I play a lot of outside of work, but it works really well. So games that work with time. So something where you have to be a little quick with it, or games that have deduction aspects. I find those work out really well. So something that fits in that 45-minute time frame. I think we just played Ninjutsu the other day, and that went over really well. We play a lot of roll and writes. So like the Welcome To was a really popular one, or Quinto, games like that. Those do really well. Next one on the docket will be Now Boarding, which is one that works with that time element. I would love to, I think I haven't played, but it was one of my coworkers who pulled an Unlock. And I think these are great games for kind of professional development. So any kind of deduction type games that really gets the brain working. So those Unlock games. What's the other one, Suzanne? The word is escaping me now. There's Unlock. Exit. Thank you. Exit. Those types of games I think work really well. Any type of cooperative game or anything that pushes people to work together. That's why some of those time type of games, which I'm not a huge fan of, but seem to work really well in that setting, forces people to work together and use the best kind of strategies. So those are some things that I would suggest. Off this, if you want a list of games that I have used in the classroom or something that you could use, definitely send me an email and I can definitely make a more comprehensive list for you. So I hope that helps, but I'm glad to see you're throwing some Harry Potter in there. I love Harry Potter.
I love the idea of board games in the classroom, and I love the idea of board games to help develop the teachers as well. I think that is awesome. So kudos to you both.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, folks. I think that we will call it a show. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. It's always such a delight to be able to talk board games with you. If you have questions for either myself or Mandy or both of us, feel free to email us. Of course, Suzanne at dicetower.com.
And Mandy, that's Mandy with an I, at dicetower.com.
Next week, Tom and Eric will be back with episode 582. Talking about replaced games. Or were they? Dun, dun, dun. And then after that, we'll have to, you're going to have to drop Tom and Eric some notes and tell them that they should join Mandy and I for the episode following that. And maybe we can get some live recording going on at PAX U.
Absolutely.
Until next time, thank you, everybody. I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandy Hutchinson.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vazel Memorial Fund is an organization dedicated to helping gamers in need. Learn more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvazel.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Suzanne, Mandy, and Eric, with assistance from Itai Perez, Derek Porter, Rob Searing, and Jeff Rademacher. Our theme is composed by Timothy Pinkham and arranged by Matt Bellier, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. All right, here it is. That time again for Two Truths and a Lie. So I'm going to go first, if you don't mind, Suze.
Oh, please.
All right, so from last episode, I'll start with my number one here. I've colored my hair blue-black. I've colored my hair green. And I've colored my hair red. If you picked I've colored my hair green as the lie, you would be correct. Green is probably my least favorite hair color. And least favorite player color. I'm so sorry to all of you who like green.
Yeah. Noted.
Okay, what about you, Suzanne?
My reveal from last ep is I own 6 copies of Lupin Chewy. I own 2 copies of Roll Through the Ages. And I own 5 copies of Crisscross. And the lie is that I own 2 copies of Roll Through the Ages.
I'm sorry, you own 6 copies of Lupin Chewy?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry. Is that judgment I hear in your tone?
Oh, not at all. Just shock and surprise.
I have adapted one of my Lupin Chewies because Lupin Chewy plays 3 people. I have little special extenders that I bought and attached so he can play 6 people. I'm just saying, Lupin Chewy's awesome.
Wow, that definitely didn't go where I thought it was going to go. All right, so my new ones for this week are the following. I like paper money in games. I like coins in games. I like both coins and paper money in games. So let's see which one is the lie. What about you?
I feel like that last one's a bit of a cheat, Mandy. We'll see about this one. All right.
Maybe not.
I kind of copied you a little bit. So
Yeah.
I like custom wooden bits. I like plain wood cubes. And I like metal coins.
All right, well, there you have it. Good luck, everyone. This episode is sponsored by... From USAopoly is Tapple. Fast word fun for everyone. Get ready to experience Tapple, an award-winning fast-paced word game that gives families and friends a rush of excitement as they compete to beat the timer. Pick a category and get to thinking of words that fit the remaining letters around the Tapple wheel. But don't take too long to answer or you'll be out of that round. Be the last person standing to Tapple victory. Lots of fun for families and adults of all ages. Available at your favorite local game store today. For ages 8 and up, for 2 to 8 players, and the MSRP is $19.95.